Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 131 of the Dynasty Junkies. Whew, man, what a week. Dynasty Junkies, obviously a part of the Dynasty Addicts Podcast Network, the DAP Network, if you will, and we do and we will. Obviously, we've had a hell of a season. We're coming down to the last game. Super Bowl's coming up this week. If you're watching us live on Twitter and YouTube, thank you for being here with us. We got some fun stuff to talk about tonight. But before we get into that, let's kick it over to my co-host for the night, Scott Sidlow. How you doing tonight, Scott?
I'm frankly just glad that the insufferable Eagles fan isn't here tonight. We don't have to deal with him. So, should be a good show regardless.
Well, when we put the schedule together, and I realized this about, 4 weeks ago, I was like, either Rocky is off and the Eagles will be playing, and that's probably for the best. He's going to need every ounce of Yingling he can get through the night. You know what I mean? He's going to be stressed. Or Bengals will be playing, and I'll be stressed and need to talk about it. So either way, this works out well, is my thought. But yes, it is a good night for us tonight. I'm at Indoor Hall FF. We've got Scott Sidlow. But then obviously in the third chair tonight, the one and only Britt Flinn. How you doing tonight, Britt?
I'm so good. Thank you guys for having me.
Oh, we're excited to have you on. I know we were talking a little bit before the show, and you mentioned this too. You're kind of more of a redraft fan and kind of getting your toes into the Dynasty. Before we get too deep, I guess, why don't you give people who are listening a little bit about your history with Dynasty or lack thereof, maybe? Is that a good way to put it?
Oh, yeah, definitely lack thereof. I've always been a redraft girly. I don't like trades. I'm also very impatient. I want to start my team over from scratch. If it does well or does bad, I get bored with it. I don't care. I want a new thing. And so last year I finally dipped my toes in the Dynasty, but it turned out that water was not shallow. And I just sank to the bottom and entered a ton. Yes. So I ended up being in a ton of Dynasty leagues. Didn't win any of them, obviously, because I took over a couple orphans, a couple startups, which were different. But I feel like I've got a little baby grasp on what Dynasty is. So I'm happy to be here and hopefully broaden my knowledge about that tonight.
Well, perfect. And we can obviously have a lot of discussions about this. Scott and I have some experience. How many leagues are you in, Britt? Just so we can kind of get an idea. Dynasty leagues. Let's be specific.
Dynasty, I think I'm in 8.
8. Okay.
The total number of leagues last year was like in the mid 30s. So
there you go. That's a lot of redraft.
Like I said, I am a redraft girly. I love it.
Well, no, that's good. I was at about 25 or 30 myself, if you count some of the best balls that don't really count. And then I'm only in 16 dynasties. So I'm not that much further from you. But Scott, what's your number right now in your dynasty league?
Well, I had to leave some because of the end of season scenario. So we're at 44 right now.
44. So so Scott's got some experience. We know what we're doing over here.
Yeah, but it'll be interesting to hear the perspective from being new to Dynasty now, like as compared to, 10 years ago. It was just such a different world. So I think it'll be fun to get the different perspective, honestly.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I was saying too to you, Britt. Like, we don't necessarily think of ourselves as better than anyone else. There's so many different layers and different player groups and different experience levels. I love this Jesse in the chat, and we'll be talking about Jesse later, but went from 0 to 8 in 1 year. Great start. That's exactly right. Like, you're definitely an addict at that point. If you're going in, you're a junkie. You're in the right place. Like, it doesn't matter how quick you get there. You got to 8. I mean, and Mr. Scamper's in the chat. 8 dynasty leagues year 1. Yeah, like you're in. Yeah, whether you like it or not, you're a junkie like the rest of us. So yeah, welcome to the show. Before we get too far, I do want to talk a little bit about the superb owl. We talked about it briefly. The Super Bowl, of course, with the Eagles coming up. We'd be remiss if we didn't at least give picks or talk about a little bit about the Super Bowl. I mean, obviously, we're going to get into the NFC West tonight. We got the buy, sell, hold kind of conversation. But I guess I'm curious. Maybe, Scott, I'll kick it to you first. Is there anything you're looking at in the Super Bowl when it comes to Dynasty? Is there anything that you think can, change values in that last game of the season, or are you pretty much locked in?
Well, didn't you see the script? It was leaked. So I mean, we already have the stats.
Already
we
done.
Know what happens. So I mean, I'll still watch because I mean, what else am I gonna do? But I mean, you can honestly, for me, it's like what I'll call the Gabe Davis effect. Okay, right. So like if we see Kadarius Toney go nuts in this game, right? He has like 3 catches for like 120 yards and 2 touchdowns, something like that. If I had any shares of him, because I don't think he's very good, but if I had any shares, I'd sell him. But I mean, that's what I'm looking at is something like that. If there's some sort of singular performance in which you're going to overweight that because it's not only the most recent game, but the last game and the biggest game and all of those things, then I will be looking to take advantage of that. And, you know, the other way around too, like even somebody like Dak Prescott right now, everybody is just shitting on him like crazy. It's like, yeah, I mean, he didn't have a great game. I get it. But it's like, this is dynasty value. Like, you know, lose like 25% over that. Like, really? Sure. Great. I'll take him.
Yeah,
So,
I'll take the discount. Yeah,
that's definitely what I'm personally looking for. If people want to overreact to one game, and a lot of people do, that's the world we live in.
I amen to that. And I think too, a lot of this is the same as I've been playing a lot of the postseason when it comes to Dynasty is I'm more of a seller than a buyer, right? Like I'm more of like willing to sell on the news and sell on the hype. I'm not going to be buying on the hype. I'm fine to hold, right? I mean, I think even holding isn't the worst ever because again, there's no other football games after this Sunday, sad as it is. There's no other football after this Sunday until maybe you can count preseason to kind of get some actual on the field notes about who's doing what and who's earned what reps and all that. So much has to change still coming up with the draft and free agency and everything else. So like this is the time to sell. If you see it, like the one player I'm thinking like, let's say Kenneth Gainwell gets like 2 touchdowns and 100 yards. I'm selling every share of Kenneth Gainwell I have. If people are willing to pay, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not holding that. Like, are you kidding me? So yeah, I'm definitely more of a seller than a buyer. What about you, Britt? I mean, obviously it's only your first real off season or postseason in Dynasty, but what are your thoughts as a new player in this game?
Yeah, I think I still hold on to that redraft mentality a little bit too much. I'm like, just hold, just hold. You don't want to go too crazy and make a decision when you don't really know a lot. And I tend to actually probably wait too long. I don't jump on like when the news is released or when the news happens. I want to see a little bit more, and by then it's too late. So that's something that I'm learning to do. But I'm kind of interested in watching like Pacheco and
Yeah.
CEH. You know, now that CEH is coming back, is he going to regain that status as like a 1A or 1B to Pacheco's 1A, 1B situation? That to me is something that I really want to see in this game. And depending on how they use him coming off of injury, CH is probably already on your sell block, but might be even more of a priority to get off your roster if Pacheco does indeed take over those snaps.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. I mean, there's a lot of interesting question marks with CEH in general, right? Like he had so much hype coming into the season, or 2 seasons ago, I guess, and kind of getting all this, you know, overblown, I would say, and kind of the post-hype sleeper he could be considered, right? He had all this hype and then became asleep. He might still be asleep, and there's hard to say what's going to happen. But you're exactly right. Let's say CEH gets two touchdowns and 100 yards. You know what I mean? Like, what if that is his resurgence and he's back on the big stage when everybody is watching this game? Again, that's the time to sell CEH. You know what I mean? Like, that's the sell on the hype is what I tend to do. But at the same time, your hold mentality is not usually the wrong thing either. You've got plenty of time to make it, right? Like, there's no reason to buy or sell right now, right? Like, this is the last game. There's no other things that can happen. If anything, things are going to be changing into chaos. And it's all speculation about what chaos you think is going to happen next. So really, it's a fun time in that regard. But I think a lot of people that are redrafters, much like yourself, I'm sure, come into Dynasty with a little bit of hesitation on trading because it's like, I don't make trades in January and February. I've never had to do this. Like, I'm used to drafting my team being done in December and waiting. So it's totally normal to just kind of hold on. And I think making Dynasty a little more redraft friendly in that regard isn't a bad idea either. That's what you're familiar with. So yeah, I think this game is going to be very interesting. We're going to see some things that we've already seen. We're going to see Pat Mahomes put the team on his back, you know, throw a lot to Kelsey, see how Pacheco does. I love that logic too. We're going to see Jalen Hurts obviously supplant himself as the best player in the NFC and do all these crazy things. I mean, again, it's 2 number 1 seeds battling for the title. It's kind of a yawn fest in my opinion. Like I was saying this to someone else. There's no underdog. Like I feel like I'm used to having like a some sort of David versus Goliath and cheering for David. You know what I mean? Like, let's do it. We can get this. And they're both Goliaths, really. I mean, like both of these teams are kind of built to win. I wouldn't be shocked if it's a 35-34 kind of game. I wouldn't be shocked if it's a 14-13 kind of game. I just don't know what to expect. But I am excited to see it. And I guess for Dynasty, at least for fantasy, there's definitely some big name players playing in this. And I just hope nobody gets injured. I always say they just want a good game. Like, let's go out there and put it all in the field. And hopefully we learn some things. And that's kind of the fun of this. But anything else you guys want to cover on the general playoffs or Super Bowl? Anything you want to talk about still, Scott? Or are you good? All good. Britt, you got anything else you want to bring up?
I just think it's there's not a lot of drama, like you said, but it is still really fun to see like both Kelsey brothers, to see the Andy Reid
Yes.
revenge game, those kind of things. So there are still those little narratives out there. So we can still cheer for something. And not to put, a black fly in anybody's tea or anything, but somebody posted, how great would it be if both Kelsey brothers link arms after the game and walk off and retire? And I'm like, do not put that juju out after Kelsey has had the best season, of his career. Like, don't put that out there. So I'm going to watch it just to make sure that doesn't happen.
I can't imagine them both retiring because one of them would have had to lose, right? Like if they were on the same team and they won, maybe. And also, I think Jason Kelsey is more likely to retire. He's the older brother anyway, I believe, right? And like Travis
Yeah.
is got some years left and it's a different position and all this. I could see if the Eagles winning, Jason retiring, but I don't see any other combination of that happening. But that would be an interesting twist, and that would change things on the Eagles too. I mean, Jason Kelsey is a linchpin of that offensive line, so that would be interesting if we see some retirements. I hadn't considered that. There could be some interesting drama in the offseason if some of that changes for sure. And yeah, if Kelsey, I don't even know if I want to say it. If Kelsey retires, that would blow everyone up. Like fantasy in general would just turn to crap on the tight end position. It's like it used to be like tier 3 or 4. Now it's really Kelsey and then everyone else. So that would change drastically some values of players. But anyway, with that, I think we've covered that well enough. There's not much to cover. We'll talk about it next week, of course, as we see what things happen. But as always on this show and in Dynasty in general, we look to the future. We look to what's next. But to do so, we do have to reflect and see what we've learned and kind of figure out some things of where we're going next. So with that, we're going to get into our NFC West breakdown tonight. We're going to talk about buys, sells, and holds for every team. We're going to mention the players that we kind of think are the top fantasy players on the team. Obviously, these are not the only players, and these are not ranked or anything. This is not meant to be a slight to anyone if they're not on the list or whatever. It's just some names that we can talk about tonight. So we'll start out with the 49ers. Obviously, the best team in the NFC West almost made the Super Bowl, I should say. They came down to the NFC Championship. Did not have a great end of the season, except the fact that Brock Purdy showed up and did an amazing job. So obviously, their top fantasy players, Brock Purdy and Trey Lance. There's a question mark there. Jimmy Garoppolo, even you could call a fantasy player there still. Christian McCaffrey, Elijah Mitchell, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle. A lot of good fantasy names here. And Scott, I'll kick it to you first. I guess who would be your best buy on this team? Is there anyone on the 49ers that you're actively looking to acquire before we get too deep in this?
Unfortunately, no. I was looking at DLF ADP right now for just, I guess, all of these players really, just kind of doing some research. And I mean, Trey Lance, I was thinking the opportunity might be to buy, especially with everything that happened with Purdy and all this stuff, who's going to be the starter, blah, 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 whatever. So I would say go get Trey Lance, but I mean, he's QB 13, in startups right now, which seems like really high. So
I'll be bringing that up next.
Really buying him right now for a great price. But I also can't say like everybody else is so through the roof value wise. I don't know who else you could really buy. So I don't have a great buy for the 49ers.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking the same. I buy maybe Christian McCaffrey, but the length and longevity of running backs, even in this Shanahan system, isn't great. And yeah, I don't really want to go out and buy anybody. I think they're either holds or sells for me.
Entirely fair. Yeah, I think the only one that I would even list as a buy, because you guys are hitting everything I am. I'm not buying Brock Purdy. I'm not willing to pay what people probably want for him. And it's the same kind of thing with Lance. He's just too expensive. The only one on this list that I even considered was Brandon Ayuk, because again, Deebo Samuel is not made of gold. He's not made of steel. He is still fragile. Christian McCaffrey had a terrific year and was healthy the whole time. Is that going to happen next year? We can never know for sure. It's almost like playing with house money at this point with both Deebo. I mean, he missed a little bit of time, and Christian McCaffrey playing a lot of the games. There is a chance that whoever had Ayuk had a really bad year, and they're not happy with Ayuk. You might be able to get him for cheaper than his value. So that was my only real buy. But to pivot into my sell, it's got to be Trey Lance for me. If he's going as QB 13, and we aren't even sure he's the starter next year, I'm sorry, but to me, I'm out. I'm done. I would gladly trade the QB 13 away because there's too many question marks. We all pretty much guarantee that Garoppolo's not coming back to this team. Shanahan has so much said so himself. But Purdy played pretty well, and there was some news I think out today that Kittle's like it's Purdy's job to lose. I mean, there's no guarantee of who it's going to be, so I'm kind of out on both, and I'm just willing to sell either one at this point. Obviously, I'm not going to sell for peanuts. I want to get QB 13 value as much as I can. But if somebody's willing to give me a little bit of a discount, I'm still willing to sell Trey Lance. That guy worries me. So, I mean, are you on the same page here, Britt? You get where I'm coming from?
Oh yeah, 100%. I have never been in on Lance, to the chagrin of my fellow Lightning Round co-host.
That's right.
Because Kev is a huge North Dakota State fan. But now you look at Lance coming off of injury. He was already risky not playing for 2 years in a row. Now you add in a third year. There's too much talent coming up for him to be that far behind the curve. And then, like you said, you've got what Kittle said about Purdy. San Francisco has never been like a super pass happy team. Anyway, the value of Lance was built on his legs. And if he doesn't get that starting job, you're just, no, he's too expensive. Try to get rid of him. Try to find the schmuck who still believes that Lance has some stuff left in him. And then I think Debo, you could probably sell. He has dealt with his fair share of injuries. And then with that uncertainty at quarterback, I don't know if he's going to return that value that he had a year or two ago. Kittle, you can sell, but you have that same injury concern with him. I'm kind of just of the opinion to kind of hold with a little bit of trepidation on everybody on the 49ers.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. I think they're probably the easiest team to just put them all in the hold bucket, really, because they all have so much chaos and fluctuation and valuation of all this. What about you, Scott? Anybody on this team that's a screaming sell for you?
So, I mean, Ayuk was initially going to be my buy, but he's at wide receiver 21. So that's about where he should be. Debo's just ahead of him at wide receiver 18. And he's 27 years old already. So honestly, there's probably 30 receivers I'd rather have personally. Kittle had that nice end of the year. He's at tight end 5. So he's kind of rebounded back to almost to where he was, minus adding in Pitts and then Hawkinson also having that crazy year. And then ultimately CMC is RB1. And I mean, the golden rule of Dynasty is if you have the RB1, you sell.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Repeat. It just doesn't happen. So, I mean, if you want to play against the odds, by all means, but I like to go with the odds. And so based on that, I would like to sell CMC, though, like we talked about last week with like Dalvin Cook being a sell. I mean, this is a hard time of year to sell running backs, so unless you can find a contender or maybe somebody with a late pick, you can kind of do a package deal. That might be your only option. Otherwise, you're saying he's a sell, but you're kind of hanging on and waiting until, let's get into the season and, let's get a few more games. And then his value isn't going to go anywhere. Regardless of what happens in the draft, there's almost nothing that can affect CMC's value as of right now. Right. So you can probably hang on, but if you can move him, I definitely would, but I could say the same for Kittle and say the same for Lance too. So yeah, there's a lot of sells going on there.
Yeah, this team is full of studs, so it's kind of like it's all league dependent, of course. But I mean, if you get an offer, you can't refuse. You know what I mean? Like, go for it. I think you hit the nail on the head, though. I mean, CMC isn't going to be playing in any football games that matter until September. It's unlikely that he gets hurt in the offseason. He's obviously been through this before. It's very unlikely that the team brings in anybody of substance to hurt CMC's value. Like, I'm with you. I don't see any of that happening. He's probably the most insulated, which is why for me he was the hold in my choice. Just because he is RB1. I agree with you. Selling RB1 is almost always the move I say. Sell RB1 for RB3 and a pick. You know what I mean? Like, move down a little bit because you can't get any higher. But again, I think CMC is one of the most insulated values in Dynasty right now, which again, a year ago, I would have said you're crazy for saying that. But it's amazing what a difference a year makes, right? Jonathan Taylor and Najee Harris were like locked in. Neither one of them are in the top 5 right now. Jonathan Taylor's running back 3. I should be careful. But Jonathan Taylor had a rough year too. You know what I mean? Like, he had some ups and downs and on offense that was unknown. And so, like, as much as we want to say we know what the future holds, especially at running back, we really don't. And Scott, we talk about it all the time. Our philosophy is sell running backs as soon as the season ends. Like, get me out of all the running backs. So I get why you want to sell him. But yeah, I just feel like his value is going to be there. And come August, that name's going to matter so much more. It's potential you could get more for him in August, but that's kind of like you're speculating 8 months out, 6 months out. Like that's a long way away. That's a big question. So I don't mind that logic. But anything else you want to say about the Niners, Britt? Any of these guys that are pure holds, I guess, before we get too far into this and go on to the next team?
I think you can make a case for anybody being a buy or sell.
Yeah.
So I don't think anybody's a pure hold. It's just up to you and your league and where you're sitting with your team. So
Yeah, I agree. And I think actually somebody, Scamper said this in the chat, is and Ayuk all if you're competing. I think that's kind of the twist too, is if you're rebuilding, it's going to be tricky to act like any of these players are going to be long-term, options. I feel like even Ayuk, the youngest, or Lance, even, I don't know, all of these guys are kind of like 1 to 2 year dynasty assets. But if you're contending, that's exactly who you want on your team. You know what I mean? Like, let's go get some of these guys. If I'm rebuilding, I might not be targeting any of them. Really, like these are maybe not the chip dynasty assets because they're so expensive. You know what I mean? Like I don't necessarily want to be paying up if I'm not contending. If I'm a year away or just not sure about my team, I'm not sure I want to invest a ton of assets. I'd rather break that apart and have multiple ways to grow my team. So yeah, it's a tricky spot. But again, Niners, man, just what a team. Like they're by far one of the better teams in the NFC that is just fun to look at. We got Kyle Senra in the chat, which I think is bringing up a point we kind of hit on. I think Lance makes sense at QB 13 just because there's really no one else. And that's kind of what it is. I mean, I'm looking at this too. QB 14 is Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
QB 15 is Kenny Pickett. Like it drops off a shelf.
Daniel
right?
Jones, Russell Wilson, Jared Goff. Yeah. No,
so you're exactly right, Kyle. There's a lot of question marks at QB. And I think that's part of why Lance is there because his upside is better than everyone behind him. But his downside is lower than almost anyone. He could start 0 games again. We don't know. So yeah, Niners are a fun one for sure. And we're going to have all offseason to talk about these players. That's what I love about Dynasty. It's like it's just speculation all around. I don't expect them to do anything crazy in the draft, though. So I don't think any of the values are going to change because of that. It's just, is this the same team? Are we going to get the same output? And then, of course, who's the QB? That's always what we're going to talk about. So with that, let's move on to the next best team in the NFC West. Second place was the Seattle Seahawks, Russ's favorite team. Hopefully Russ listens to this at some point. Top fantasy players for the Seahawks, Geno Smith, Kenneth Walker, who is the new offensive rookie of the year. We just found out. Rashad Penny, I guess counts. DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and Noah Fant. I mean, what an interesting group of players. I mean, some of those players feel like, yeah, that's a good player. And that's a good, that's a good player. Like it's just all over the place. So I guess, Britt, I'll kick it to you first. Who would you say is your top buy if there's anyone on the Seahawks that you want on your roster in Dynasty?
I know running backs aren't typically a buy, but with Kenneth Walker and what he showed this season, and then plus winning, offensive rookie of the year, I really think that Kenneth Walker has to be a buy. He's got that every down back. I don't really see Rashad Penny coming back. They didn't pick up his 5th-year option. Then they finally signed him in free agency, and then he gets injured again. So I really don't see him coming back. None of the other running backs on that roster really made a huge impact. So I really think that Walker is going to be that every down back in this offense. And Pete Carroll has shown that he's a hell of a coach, and he can get things out of players that other coaches can't. I wouldn't hold on to him for, more than a couple of years, but for next season, I really like Kenneth Walker.
I'm right there with you. Yeah. And I think Kenneth Walker is probably the buy for me as well. I just feel like he's a running back 2 in the current ADP for DLF right now. And I don't blame him. I think that makes total sense given his production and the way that team leaned on him. I mean, he didn't get hurt, which is always a little bit of a nice upside, right? He stayed healthy and won the offensive rookie of the year. He obviously did well. I'm with you. I usually don't like buying running backs this time of year, and again, I think his price is going to be too high for me to actually achieve that. But of all the ones on this roster, that's the one I want on my team the most. That's really what it comes down to. The other guys, I mean, even DK is good, but that's still a risky offense for me. What do you think, Scott? Is there a buy other than Walker, or is he on your buy list as well?
There is an incredibly boring player that you're not going to like, that no one's going to like, but he's a buy because he's currently wide receiver 41.
Oh,
okay. He has played at least 15 games every year of his career, including 16 in all but one. He's finished as a wide receiver 13, 15, 8, 13, and 17 in the last 5 seasons. And he's going as wide receiver 41. He's also 30 years old. He's also likely to get either replaced in the draft or even possibly get cut. So this doesn't come without risk. But he is also a brand new realtor, a Keller Williams agent. So my fellow agent here. So I got to just represent for my guy, Tyler Lockett. And listen, if you're a contender and you want one of those boring pieces that like nobody cares about, especially this time of year, remember rookie fever, the picks, that's where it's all at. Guess who's cheap? Vets, especially old vets. So if you can get him thrown in a trade, maybe he's a piece coming back in a deal. Maybe it's move back in the draft and pick him up type of deal. That's what I'm looking to do. He's just somebody that's going to keep plugging in, and he's not done. So even if he doesn't end up on the Seahawks, he'll go somewhere and play. So no matter how that turns out, whether it's there, whether it's with another, a rookie, regardless of who the quarterback is, he just continues to produce different offenses, doesn't matter. So he's a really boring guy, but he's cheap and he could definitely help you. He's one of 3 players that were on all of my championship teams last season. So total coincidence, I promise you, but it's so funny. So I'm just going to bring that up.
No, it's a great point. And I'll kind of cut to a little bit. Lockett was going to be my hold because I feel like you're not going to really get a lot in a trade for him because everybody's going to act like he's running or wide receiver 41. It's the same thought process though. And at that point, you're right. He's so cheap. Why not make him a buy? Let's go get him. You know what I mean? If you're not going to value him, my thought is, right. Yeah, exactly. If I'm in a chance to, finish in the top 3, let's say this year, missed out on the championship game or won the whole thing, right? Lockett's a prime ad. I mean, you can get him for a third in some leagues, depending on what roster he's on. Because I think some people are just done with him and they're like, I don't need him. He's too old. He's 30. He's hit that cliff. I don't think that's true. I think he's still got some talent left. But that's kind of why he was a hold, because I have a lot of shares of Lockett. You know what I mean? Like I'm not buying him anywhere, but that's why I was thinking that. But you're exactly right. He's a perfect buy because he's so cheap. Yeah. Anything on Lockett, Britt, before we move on?
Well, I think that's a really good point that even though he is older and that he might get cut, he's going to end up on a team somewhere. And he's shown that he can play with any quarterback and he's going to make an impact wherever he goes. So I think that kind of adds a little bit of safety to his floor that you don't necessarily get with other players. So I really like that you brought that up.
Yeah. And to clarify, Scampers brought this up in the chat. We put it on the screen. Walker did not win Rookie of the Year. I was mistaken on that. That was Garrett Wilson. But Walker was in the Rookie of the Year conversation, which, again, amazing. He still did an amazing job. I just want to clarify that. I want to get into the sells, though, for this team. And, I mean, you could almost say they're all sells at the right price. Everybody is. And I think the only one that I would list as a sell, the one that comes to mind for me is Geno Smith, right? In Superflex, I like Geno Smith. Don't get me wrong. I think he's a terrific player. But at this stage of the game, we don't really know what free agency or the draft is going to do. There is still a chance that this team brings someone in. Yes, Geno Smith played well. Yes, he took him to the postseason. He did nothing wrong, right? He didn't lose the job. I don't think Pete Carroll cares about any of that. It's the fallacy of rational coaching. We fall for it every year. Pete Carroll's a chaotic man, and I think there is a chance that some quarterback is there in the second round. We saw it last year with all the quarterbacks dropping and Malik Willis being there. Like it happens every year in the draft. Some crazy thing occurs. So I am willing to sell Geno Smith right now just because he's at that age cliff in a sense. I mean, age cliff is tricky to say for a quarterback, but I mean, again, he's QB 19 right now in DLF ADP. He's 32 years old. I mean, again, I like him better than QB 19. I think that's a little low for him, but I don't think that really factors in all of his downside either. There is a chance he doesn't play at all or is a backup next year. So if someone's willing to give me, Trey Lance for Geno Smith, I'm probably taking Geno Smith on that, which again makes no sense given their ADP. I'd prefer Geno Smith, but if somebody wants to give me the same kind of price and pay a top 12 quarterback for Geno, I'll gladly sell that. I just think his probably has the lowest floor upcoming from what we have to see. I guess, Scott, am I on the same page as you on this one? Do you think you have a different idea, or is Geno a good sell?
Yeah, I mean, he's a free agent, so
right.
We have to assume that his best landing spot would be back there to be a bridge quarterback if in fact they draft someone. I don't know. I mean, I don't think he's very good. So it's this year was pretty shocking. But I mean, he has good weapons. They kept the offense simple. They ran the ball a lot. So, I mean, it's not like he can't continue to do that. But I don't know. I think it was kind of one of those, like if we look back in 2 or 3 years and you're like, oh man, remember when Geno Smith had that just crazy year? Like I just think that is the more likely scenario. So yes, I would be selling kind of regardless of what you can get, package up, package down, whatever you need to do, like tier down or package up, whatever. I'm not really interested in Geno, nor the running game for that matter. Because as much as I like Kenneth Walker, and he just blew me away in college, like he just doesn't catch passes, and they have a couple free agents from all those random dudes they had, like Travis Homer the last few years, Rashad Penny, they're all free agents. So they're probably going to bring somebody in that maybe they'll bring in somebody for the pass catching role. But being RB2 right now, that's just wild. Like you could sell that all day. So pretty much they're all sells for me.
I get that. And just to kind of put it in perspective too, Kenneth Walker in ADP is ahead of Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Kyle Pitts. I'd probably rather have all those guys over Kenneth Walker myself, but that's just how I build my teams, right? So like I get your logic entirely. If you can get those kind of trades, even like a 1-for-1 and you have to add a third or a fourth or something, I'm fine with that, right? Like whatever you got to do to make that kind of thing happen, I don't mind that logic. Britt, what about you? What any of these guys that's a sell for you, or any other points you want to add on the guys we're already talking about?
Yeah, I think you guys hit all the points on Geno, but at this point in his career, I'm even considering DK Metcalf a sell. He's just been so kind of up and down, and I know that that's relative, but with Geno getting a little bit older, being a free agent, with these two offensive linemen who were rookies having another year under their belt, I can definitely see Pete Carroll moving back to a more run-heavy offense like he did in the past, like during the Legion of Boom days. And I don't necessarily know if Metcalf is going to have that upside that he's had in the past going forward, especially with that uncertainty at quarterback. So I would consider selling him and getting a little bit more out of him before he does fall off that cliff.
That's a fair point. Yeah, and he's 25. He's ranked as, or ADP is wide receiver 13. Now, granted, this is January ADP. February ADP is not out yet, but I mean, wide receiver 13 for DK Metcalf feels a little high, so I don't blame you for that.
Agreed.
Metcalf for me was the hold, and it's really just because I don't know if anyone's going to give you wide receiver 13 value for Metcalf. I just think he had kind of a depressing year a little bit for fantasy. I don't know. I don't think I won a whole lot of games because of DK Metcalf. Like he just had a quiet year. It doesn't mean he's bad, but again, the way that a lot of this, wide receiver 2 and the infinite sadness kind of goes, there's like 30 or 40 wide receivers I wouldn't mind putting in as my wide receiver 2, and he's the number one of those. Like, I don't know. Like, maybe that's not worth it. Do I see his value going up? I kind of do. So that's kind of why I like your logic as a sell in that point. If you think you can get out, I kind of would rather hold and see what the future holds, but I don't mind your logic there at all. Scott, what about you? Anybody on this team that you're holding, or are you pretty much just selling because you're not sold on the team in general?
Yeah, I mean, DK is my hold, but I can definitely see him as a sell just because, like you said, 13 seems a little bit high, especially looking at the players around him. I mean, there's plenty of other players I would pivot to, kind of because almost like Britt said, it's almost like he's in the middle, right? Because if you're rebuilding or retooling, you're going to want to go with one of these younger guys.
Right.
And if you're competing, you're going to want somebody that you can count on to get you there. Right. So yeah, it's weird that he's up at that point, but it's almost just because he's younger than the old guys. Right. And he's older than the young guys. So he's kind of there by default, but
he's like finishing sixth in Dynasty. It's just not what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and before we get away from the Seattle team, I think Puff Pass Kick had a good thing. We haven't talked about the tight ends at all, which is not uncommon. Tight ends are tricky, but what do you think about Seattle tight ends? I have a few teams with Fant and Will Dissly. Almost felt like you had to play both every week. I kind of agree. Fant was tempting for me as a buy because he's so low. He's so cheap. And honestly, I still like that talent. Tight ends take a while to come around and all this. I feel like you could probably get Fant for dirt cheap in most leagues. I think a lot of managers that have him are just kind of done with him and they want somebody else. But that's kind of tight end in general. So it really depends on who you have ahead of him, right? I don't mind adding Fant as a tight end 3, but I'm sure as hell not planning on starting him every week if I can help it. So, I mean, again, I wanted to bring that up because there's really not a lot of tight end love on this team. But Britt, what do you think about the tight ends? Is there any one of those that is Fant someone you're looking for, or you're kind of done with?
I mean, I'm not looking for him, but if you have both of those guys on your team at that tier of tight ends, you're basically looking for touchdown upside, and you never knew which one of those guys was going to get that touchdown week to week. So I feel it. I get it. Tight end is such a crapshoot that honestly, if you don't have one of those top tier guys, you almost have to play who you've got. He doesn't excite me, but he does have that potential to get a touchdown. So there's that. I'm non-committal on him, I guess, is how I phrase it.
That makes total sense. Yeah, it's tough to be committal about Noah Fant and Will Dissly, right? Like they're not that great. I mean, they could be, but yeah, it's annoying. Before we move on from Seattle, recovering Ridley Truther had this one in the chat. Just traded Kenny Walker away and got the 104 in a 12-team, 1 PPR Superflex, 2 tight end premium, and the league went nuts saying I underpaid. I'll take 104 any day, in my opinion. I mean, Scott, I'll go to you on this one. You were talking about Ken Walker being a sell. Would you sell Ken Walker for the 104 in this draft in Superflex?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. I mean, 103 definitely.
103 definitely. I was thinking the same. 104 is that tier break. That's a trickier gap. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it puts you in a good position too, regardless of how everything shakes out. So I think 104 is still perfectly fine. Yeah, I'd be fine with that.
Yeah, and I know it's still kind of early, and this is your first postseason, Britt. But where are you at with trading for rookie picks? I personally like to wait a little longer and find out where the actual picks are and who's going to be on what teams. And sometimes I end up overpaying because I missed the window. But I'd rather know where the tier breaks are myself. But what are your thoughts as kind of a newer dynasty player with picks like that? Would you trade Ken Walker for the 104?
Yeah, I'm the same way. I want to wait and see where somebody ends up and where that draft capital ends up. Because you kind of saw it with Treylon Burks, right?
Oh, yeah.
Going to Tennessee. It was just not the situation that you wanted him to be in. Like, he's such a talented receiver, but then, they run too much. Tannehill got hurt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I would rather wait and see. But I still think that Walker at the 104 or for the 104 is a good trade.
That feels even, but man, it's tough. I might take Walker on that just because the rookies are always kind of like what you're hoping 104 turns into is Kenneth Walker. Like, why not just take Kenneth Walker? You know what I mean? Like,
but he did just mention it's a start one running back, and
yes.
So that significantly devalues the position. So yes, I'm definitely take the 104 there.
Yeah, and that is good info to add, and that's a good point too, Ridley Truther. I mean, if you only have to start one and then it's flexes after that, I might be more willing because you're not needing 2 running backs. And if it's a 3 running back league, I'm sure as hell taking Walker myself. So yeah, there's always format twists that make this fun. But yeah, I think that's good. I think we covered the Seahawks pretty deeply. I'll be honest. That was impressive, guys. Good job. Let's move on to the 3rd place team in the NFC West. We've got the Rams, the Los Angeles Rams out of Los Angeles. But they are the top fantasy players there. We've got Matt Stafford, kind of hurt, I guess, and Baker Mayfield. I didn't even put on the sheet because I don't know if he's going to be there. Cam Akers, Cooper Kupp, Van Jefferson, Allen Robinson, and Tyler Higbee. I mean, any of these guys that's a screaming buy for you, Britt. I'll start with you. Is there anyone on the Rams you want? Or are we kind of done with them? Is this just last year's Super Bowl winner and it's just trash now? What do we think?
Yeah, I honestly think that I'm pretty much done with everybody on this team except for maybe Cam Akers and maybe Cooper Kupp. But Kupp has had, outside of that crazy season that he had last year, he hasn't really done much, and he has had an injury history. And so I don't know if I want him on a dynasty squad. So I would probably sell him. Cam Akers came on a little bit, but even his status has been up in the air. Everybody else is just so hit or miss in this offense. I really think they're about to blow it up. I mean, they didn't even know if Sean McVay was going to come back as their coach.
Right.
Like, that just speaks to the uncertainty on this team. I don't really have faith in anybody. So sell.
I don't blame you at all. Anyone on this team you want to buy, Scott, on your end?
Yeah, I mean, Cooper Kupp's wide receiver 20, and I mean, it's pretty obvious why. So I don't have a problem with that, but I will absolutely take him for what he does, especially in that offense. And as long as McVay and Stafford are coming back, yeah, I'll take Kupp on my contenders. We're kind of past the point of getting maximum value, or getting, I guess, his peak value is past, right? So now pretty much whatever we pay for him, his production should surpass. So this is I'm willing to buy, and he could die on my roster.
I'm the same way. And Jesse put it in the chat, Kupp on the dip. I agree. Like, there's definitely been a price dip. I mean, Kupp was the wide receiver 1 last year, and then he got hurt. Obviously, you're not going to put up points if you're on the bench and you're on IR and all that. So I get why his value dipped. I still think he's going to come back and is going to have some talent. I think there is a chance too. I mean, again, Cooper Kupp is not necessarily the kind of player that you need to be young. He can kind of get 30 catches in 2 games and not, break a sweat. He's almost 30 years old. He'll be 30 by the time the season starts. So obviously there's a little bit of fear, I guess you could call it, with some of the receivers that hit that cliff. With Kupp, I'm not so worried. So I feel like he's probably the only one on this team that I even want to roster. You know what I mean? Like I don't want Tyler Higbee that much. I don't really want Baker Mayfield that much. Like I don't really want Cam Akers because that confuses me. This whole offense, and they don't have a lot of picks, right? Like their owner pretty much said F them picks and just, has taken all the players to go all in. They won a Super Bowl. I'm not going to fault the logic. It worked. But they're looking at a long rebuild in a sense, and they're going to have to lean on the guys they got on that roster. And I just think Kupp's the only one I really feel like having.
Yeah, and we talk about how Justin Jefferson's such a monster and like points per game, he just blows away the league. And then like you look up and you're like, oh wait, Cooper Kupp actually had more points per game.
Oh yeah, wait a minute. Yeah,
so,
Kupp was dominating while he was playing.
I mean, he's still a stud. He absolutely crushed the first half of the season before he got hurt. So I don't see any reason why he wouldn't continue to do that. Even if he falls off a little bit, he's still going to be, a PPR machine.
Yeah, and I mean, just to clarify, I want to make sure I say this out loud. I'm not buying Allen Robinson. I'm done. I'm off that train. There was all this hype last year that Allen Robinson was going to be the guy, and I remember paying pretty much like a second and a player for Allen Robinson. Bad trade, right? We didn't know it at the time. There was a whole offseason of this Allen Robinson hype. There is a chance that he comes back and does something, but he's on waivers, I'm sure, in some dynasty leagues because somebody was just like, I'm done with it. Get me out of here. Much like Kenny Galladay, right? Like just some of those players, you're just like, I'm done. I'm fed up with you. So yeah, I'm not buying Allen Robinson. I'm also not selling Allen Robinson to pivot to the next spot. You're not going to get anything for him. I think Higbee for me is the only real sell because I think some people are looking at their rosters and are like, hey, I need a tight end. Higbee did pretty well this year. I don't have it up for what he finished, but I'm pretty sure he was a tight end 1. At least some of the games I know on a point per game basis, he was still pretty high too. And again, that offense is just, kind of anemic behind Kupp. They're going to have to lean on someone. Higbee put up numbers. You could still find someone who's trying to build their roster this time of year. And again, I don't care what my roster is right now. I will gladly trade tight ends and have none on my roster in January, February. It doesn't matter, right? Just give me value. And I think there's some players out there that really still want to set their roster up in February. And it's like, dude, you got time. But yeah, I'll trade you Tyler Higbee for Tyler Lockett. Sure, I'll do something like that. So that's pretty much the only one that I would even consider selling because I feel like his value might be inflated. What about you, Britt? Anyone on this team you're trying to get rid of, I guess, before their value goes lower?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with Tyler Higbee. He finished, I think it's tight end 7 in PPR. And a lot of that value came at the end of the season when Baker Mayfield took over because he was just getting force-fed targets because nobody else on that team was healthy. Right. So if you look at the numbers that way, that value is skewed. I'm not sure how he's going to repeat that next season. So definitely buy or sell on that kind of inflated value that he put up at the end of last season. I think you're absolutely right with that.
Yeah. Anything for you, Scott? Is there anyone that you would sell, or is it just kind of get them all off my roster and drop them?
Yeah, as Britt said, Higbee was tight end 7 points per game in PPR, not in any sort of premium. But I mean, when you're ahead of, Cole Kmet, Pat Freiermuth, Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz, David Njoku, players like that are valued significantly higher, you could say he's probably a sell. You could maybe even say he's a buy because he's actually tight end 26 in startup ADP. So it's like, oh, well, I guess people still don't care for some reason. But I'll go back to your point earlier, Andrew, like, they don't have a lot of draft capital. You think they're bringing in another tight end? I mean, he's still really young. He's been there. He's been in the system. So he's one of those guys that, for me, like, I like to build the tight end room with a stud and then have some developing guy, like maybe a rookie or two, depending on how deep the rosters are. And then Higbee would be that other guy that I would have in case there's an injury or bye weeks or even a flex in, a 2.0 premium, something like that. He's exactly the type of cheap veteran I like to have on my roster in that case. So I pretty much, even though I'd say he's the sell, I could also see pretty much any scenario for Tyler Higbee at this point.
Well, and we'd be remiss if we didn't mention the tight end guru, the whisperer, the one that Britt is on the show with. Andrew Cooper would definitely call that the yin and yang strategy when it comes to tight end. I think you're exactly right. Higbee's one of those players I would love to have as my second option, kind of like an upside pick as he always talks about, as Coop always talks about, like having that stud that you start every week, but then that one guy that's on the rise. Higbee is somebody that could easily be on the rise if he's tight end 26 right now in ADP. I mean, maybe that makes him a buy, right? I mean, if he's that cheap, you're right. Like, I mean, hell, someone's going to give you more for him. I think Higbee is a perfect example, though, of your league is going to be different than my league. And I've even, again, Scott with 40 leagues, I've got 15, whatever. Like, I've got some leagues where I can probably get Higbee for a ton. I can sell him and get a ton for him. And others, it won't cost me much at all to acquire him. He's one of those players that's a little polarizing, like some people don't like him at all or are done with him. Others are willing to pay the moon for him. So it's just value everything.
Put him on your auto trade block for a second, right?
Easily. I was just going to say the second would be worth
any
it to
second.
Yep.
And then in your other leagues, just go and offer a third.
A third,
right?
exactly.
So,
yep, or 2/3. I've done that before where I'm like, I'll send 2/3. I don't care. Thirds are thirds. You can get them back. It's not the end of the world. Anyone on this team that we're holding? I mean, I can kind of start, and I'll just say Matt Stafford because I don't know what the hell to do with him. I don't think you're going to get a lot of value in a trade for him. I don't think I want to be going and acquiring him either. Like, he's not someone I'm like actively trying to get on my team. I'm not buying him, but I don't think I'm willing to sell him either. In this landscape of quarterbacks, we talked about it briefly before. It's, 10 quarterbacks and then it's 20 that just kind of suck. And Matt Stafford is QB 23 in ADP. That feels about right. A low end QB 2. I'm probably just holding on to that and just riding out the offseason and seeing how it goes. I feel like there's not really going to be a lot of change to his situation. Like you said it before, like the team is coming back with very few draft picks. I don't see them making any major waves in free agency. And McVay is back. I don't know. Stafford could be QB2 for my Superflex team. I don't mind that. Anything for you, Britt, that's a hold on this team other than Stafford, maybe?
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head with Stafford. He was disappointing last year, but we forget he was QB6 in 2021. Like, he was at that top end of quarterbacks. And with nobody else coming in, with all these rookies, with everybody retiring and switching teams, I think that certainty is something that you want to hold on to. So,
yeah. And I mean, do we even think Baker is going to be on this team next year? I mean, there's obviously a lot of question marks around that, but I can't see them doing that if they're going to bring Stafford back, which they are. Like, Stafford's under contract, but maybe they look at Stafford and say, he's a little fragile. He's getting older. I mean, he's 30, he's going to be 35 before the start of the season. I mean, that's not ancient for QB, but Stafford's taken some hits. He's been around a while. I mean, maybe there's some value in the team just signing Baker. He's already done okay there. But that would make Stafford's value drop a little bit if the team signs Baker. But I don't know. It just that whole QB room is just confusing right now. Anyone on this team for you, Scott, that's a hold, or are you pretty much ready to move on?
Yeah, I mean, it has to be Stafford because you can't sell him. So, unless they fix this running game, he's going to have to throw a lot. So, I mean, it's fine. He can be my QB 2 or 3 and, whatever. I'm assuming if, like me, any leagues I had him in last year, I pretty much was screwed. So
yeah.
I don't think it really mattered. But yeah, you can't get anything for him. So yeah, he's going to have to be the hold.
And I like that none of us talked about Cam Akers because, again, I just don't think we know what to do with that running back room. Like you said it perfectly, Scott. Like, is Cam Akers gone? Because they kind of wanted Cam Akers gone. They traded Darrell Henderson, and everyone was like, well, I guess Akers is staying. Like, we none of us, this whole year was crazy chaos for that running back room. We could honestly see Kyron Williams be the guy next year and leapfrog into the running back 2 conversation and not even talking about him on the show. That's how crazy that is. So with that, though, we'll move on to the final team in the NFC West. We'll talk about the Arizona Cardinals. What a disappointing season for that team. Like that, they were looking like, they might have a shot at this. Oh man. And then they had the in-season Hard Knocks on HBO, and it was a great series to watch. Very entertaining, but just, man, Cliff Kingsbury, as soon as the season was over, pretty much the Black Monday,
wow.
they axed him. He went to the Philippines or wherever and on a one-way flight, and no one's seen him since. He's just sitting there, burning money and loving life. But the team still has some fantasy players, and we're still going to have questions who their coach is even going to be. We don't even know that yet. Top players there. They got Kyler Murray, James Conner, Marquise Brown, DeAndre Hopkins, Rondale Moore, Zach Ertz, still kind of the ghost of Zach Ertz is still there, and Trey McBride. Britt, I'll kick it to you first. Anyone on this team that you're looking to buy that you're kind of excited about as we head into 2023?
Man, it's so hard to even figure out what this team is doing with the departure of Kingsbury and with the departure of their GM and just all the different pieces. But with the uncertainty at quarterback, I think Kyler Murray is still a buy. He does have both that passing and rushing upside that not a lot of quarterbacks have. And if his weapons come back healthy, he started the first 6 games without D-Hop. if he has a full roster and a full wide receiver room at his disposal, I think that he's going to bounce back. So I really like having him. D-Hop, I know he's getting older, but I still think he has gas left in the tank. And I don't know what his ADP is on Dynasty startups, but I don't think that it's that crazy.
Wide receiver 42, right behind Lockett.
Yeah, so that's definitely a buy for me. Everybody else, I'm just a little unsure of, except for maybe Trey McBride.
Okay. What about you, Scott? Anyone that you like buying? Is Murray your buy as well, or you got someone else in mind?
Yeah, Kyler. If you like Kyler, he's a buy. I don't like Kyler, never have, never will. Not interested in him as a person.
All right, we get it. Jeez,
literally hate him. No,
kidding.
But he would be my hold just based on his cost, and he's QB 10. But if you like Kyler, yes, you should buy at this price. I don't see how it gets any lower. He's gonna probably have to use his legs more, especially if you're talking about a team that's retooling or at least rebuilding around him. And with that, regardless of what offense comes in, Trey McBride would be my buy, even though he's a little higher than I thought he would be at tight end 13, which I think is just because of, the end of last season. He finally got on the field and showed what he can do. He's a really, really good player, and he's going to be around for a long time. So that's the kind of guy that I want to get in on now. I could see him kind of being like a Dallas Goedert type, maybe even like a Hawkinson, where he's not going to be like the top 3 guy, but he can be, one of the like next tier of players. So, and regardless, I don't think I don't think he's a guy that is just going to disappear. Like he's young, he's cheap, and he's going to be there for the next at least 3 years. So I just don't see how you'd lose on buying him at this point.
No, that's a great point. And that was going to be my buy, was going to be Trey McBride, just because I feel like even at tight end 13, I'm with you. I felt like that was higher than I expected him to be. But Zach Ertz is tight end 16. So I feel like this is maybe a little bit of hedging and just the drafters not really knowing exactly who to pick here. But again, it's that classic tight end, landscape that we see every year, where it's like, you don't have Kelsey, then it doesn't matter. Just pick one, just throw a dart. You got him. It doesn't matter. But I do see your point too, in thinking that McBride could see an uptick here. I think he did play well at the end of the year. He was a rookie that says a lot as a tight end coming in the league and learning behind Zach Ertz for a long time. I think I don't mind the idea of buying Murray. He's QB 10 in ADP right now. That seems about right for me. And I don't mind him being QB 10 because of the uncertainty and the coach and all this. But at the same time, to kind of pivot, Murray might be a sell. If somebody is a believer in Murray and they want to buy him, I'm fine to sell him. Right. I'm not necessarily quite so negative on him as Scott was. I think he's still a fine human being, and he's got some intelligence. Whatever. I'm not going to insult his family or anything. No, I'm just kidding. But Kyler Murray for me is one of those players. You're right. He's very polarizing, and you said it perfectly. If you like him, buy him. Right now is your time, because I don't know if it's going to get cheaper as the season goes on, or the off season, I should say, goes on. I don't know if it goes down. I don't know if it goes up. Maybe he's a good hold in that regard, but I don't know. I just feel like this team is going to have a lot of news blurbs. They're going to have a coach that signs, and that's going to cause a burst of value for all their players. And the coach is finally there, and that's locked down. They're going to go through the draft. I'm guessing that they're going to draft a running back, because that's kind of one of their bigger needs on the offensive side. Probably going to need some offensive line work. There's a couple different ways that this offense could draft a player, and then you could spin the narrative that Murray is the best, gets better from it. So maybe it's better to buy him now before all that happens. But again, if somebody's willing to pay the king's ransom for him, I'm fine to sell him, right? It just kind of depends on the price and how the player is viewed. But I guess, Britt, who is the sell on this team for you? Is there anyone on this team that you're like, I'm kind of done with, or is it all kind of, we'll see?
I think I would sell Marquise Brown, honestly. When Hopkins was out, he was the target monster. But after Hopkins came back, he was basically persona non grata. And he dealt with injury. Kind of the same thing with Rondale Moore. I actually like Rondale Moore over Marquise Brown, though, to be completely honest. He operates well out of the slot, but he was injured too. So I think either of those two would be decent sells. Ertz would be a sell, but I don't really know if you can get much out of him at this point in his career. And then coming off an ACL tear, I think at this point you kind of have to hold him. But yeah, see what you can get out of Marquise Brown.
I like that one. What about you, Scott? Anyone that you're selling on this Cardinals team?
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny because when you're looking at all of the bad contracts that these players got from the last GM, which is why he's no longer there.
Yeah, well,
There's
he left for
a
health reasons,
real
but yeah.
scenario that, like, I mean, imagine coming in as a GM and like wanting to bring in your own guys, and you want to clear some cap space, and you want to, you want to retool it in your image, right? But then you're like, wait a minute, every one of these guys has more dead cap than cap savings. Like, I don't even know. Like, I mean, I would say James Conner, or I would say Marquise Brown, or I would say, pretty much any one of those players. But the thing is, like, they're all pretty much locked in. I don't see them, like, no one's going to trade for James Conner's contract, right? But also cutting him is not likely. Listen, we've seen guys cut with some crazy dead cap, but it just, I don't know. Like, Zach Ertz has as much dead cap as he has cap savings. James Conner, he
Brutal.
has 3 times the dead money as the cap savings. Hopkins, he has 19.5 million in savings and 11 million dead money. So, even if he gets traded, that's gonna hurt a lot. So Marquise Brown is the only one who's essentially in the last year of he's going to be a free agent. So either they're going to have to pay him a lot, which they're already paying all these other guys. I mean, it's just a mess. It's an absolute mess. So I would say get out of pretty much anyone that you can at a reasonable price. But on the other side, I can say, well, I think a lot of these guys are going to be here because I don't know what they're going to do with them. So
that was going to be my counterpoint. Like,
it's
because
kind
of
a
the
weird
contracts,
scenario, it's just a really weird scenario.
Because of the contracts, I don't think they're going to make trades for anybody either. They're not going to be able to get rid of any of these players. The contracts are just underwater. It's going to be a weird year.
So.
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think that kind of maybe wraps it up in a sense, because I think all of these players, in my mind, it's kind of like the 49ers. All of these players should be good. Like, I feel like all of the talent on this team is crazy, and they didn't play well at all. That's bonkers to me. Like, there is just, and again, watching the in-season Hard Knocks showed a lot about how just unlucky they were almost, right? I mean, they had J.J. Watt, like, playing one of his most dominant seasons even, and it was his last one, and just they couldn't put it together. It was like the damnedest thing, and I felt kind of bad for Cliff Kingsbury a little bit, because I felt like it wasn't really his fault. The Murray injury, of course, in that fluke Monday night game, just third play of the game, like that derails their whole end of the season where they might have had a chance to come back. I don't know. This team is confusing to me. And like I said before, I think if once we have a little more clarity on the coach and kind of their scheme and what they want to do, and like maybe there's some optimism that you can find in this team, but I don't think it's there right now, right? They're in the bottom of this division, which is a pretty good division, right? This is NFC West is no joke, right? I mean, you're looking at the Niners probably being dominant in the NFC for the next 2 or 3 years. You got the Seahawks, which again surprised a lot of people and kind of went to the playoffs. They could easily do that again. I mean, that team was not messing around. They weren't terrible. The Rams, we just talked about how bad they are and all this, but that's still a Super Bowl winning team just a year ago. For the most part, their team's going to come back, and Cooper Kupp being injured, obviously. So there's a whole lot of question marks in this entire division. And I just think that, if you have any of the Cardinals on your team, you're probably holding, because they just don't know who's going to pay for anything right now. And it's kind of like the easy out is just to be like, well, hold everyone. I mean, if they're on your team, you like them at some point, you must have traded something to get them, unless you're going to sell them for more than you got, which I just don't see that happening for anybody yet. I think as of right now in February, before free agency and the draft, I think I'm holding pretty much everybody, really. But as soon as you get some spike of news, as soon as you get some trade happens somewhere else, even other trade happens or some news comes out about something, you sell on the news, sell on that hype as much as you can throughout the offseason, but don't sell now. There's no reason to sell any of them now in my book. But I don't know. It's kind of up to bat and see what people think. But any other parting thoughts, Britt, on the NFC West before we move into our last segment of the night?
No, I think that we covered it all. And like I said earlier, I need more information. More information before making any decisions, and it's so early.
Yeah, you're a true junkie. I love it. That's exactly right. The only answer that we really have is just do your best to guess, right? Speculate and make a pick one way or the other. See which way it goes. There's no wrong answer. Just keep making your team better. The strategy talk is what we're going to get into here with Find Me a Trade. But again, I think the NFC West breaks down, and it's going to be an interesting year for that whole division. But that finishes on the NFC. The next 4 weeks, we're going to talk about the AFC conferences. So or divisions. That should be entertaining. But This week, we've got our last segment of the night, Find Me a Trade, brought to us by the one and only Jesse Schott, who is in Dynasty Junkies 2, I believe. He is obviously a big fan of us. He's in a couple different leagues. I know that I think we've got him in another league. Is it Trade Addicts? I think he's getting in. Forget now. But point is, Jesse's a big fan of the show. We're going to pull up his team here in a second. But his team is Bing Pot, which is, again, a terrific Brooklyn Nine-Nine reference. It's a 12-team Superflex half PPR with a 1.5 tight end premium, 6 point per passing touchdown, -2 for interception. You start 10. It's a quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end, 5 flex, and a super flex, like we mentioned earlier with Ridley Truther. You just have to start 1 at each, and then it's a bunch of flex after that. 26 roster spots, 3 IR, and 5 taxi. And Scott, if you want to read his thoughts while I pull up his team, that'd be great.
I've got it up here, but
perfect.
Yeah.
Well, then I'll read his thoughts. Well, you get it up.
Okay.
That works for me. So, yeah, Jesse's saying he won the championship mostly because of depth and picking the right starting lineups. It feels like he needs to consolidate a little. I kind of agree, and we'll get into that. Had to spend way too much time agonizing over 3 or 4 starting spots every week. Would like to narrow that down to 2. He mentions a couple of his managers just aren't responding to texts or have left the league, which is obviously very frustrating. There's probably going to be a dispersal, which is always tricky. What do you trade if there's a dispersal and all that kind of stuff? But yeah, he said he's got multiple people lined up to join, which is always nice for a league. And then Scott, you want to pull it up or do you want me to share it?
Yeah, you have to add it. It's there. It's
gotcha.
For you.
Yep.
There you go. Okay. So quarterback, Patrick Mahomes, Kirk Cousins, Trey Lance, Taylor Heineke, Skylar Thompson. See if we can zoom in there a little better. There we go. Running backs, Zeke, Pollard, Damian Pierce, Malik Davis, Rashad Penny, Tristan Ebner, Jordan Mason, Javonte Williams, Alexander Madison, Chris Evans. Let's see, wide receiver, Waddle, DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Jerry Jeudy, Chris Godwin, David Bell, Deontay Johnson, Kevin Duvernay, Juju Smith-Schuster. Tight end. I mean, you would think, oh, this is a pretty good roster. His tight ends probably suck, and yet his tight ends are his best group here. George Kittle, Pat Freiermuth, Cole Kmet, Mark Andrews, and a handful of young upside guys there. And then you think, well, no, he's got a really good roster, and he must not have any draft picks. He doesn't, other than the 101, the 105, the 112, the 203, the 209, and a couple of other later picks there, along with some future picks. So yeah, it's a pretty loaded roster. You could see why he won the championship last season. And you know, it's exactly how do you choose who to start? You know, that's going to be the biggest issue there. So, you know, I know for me, I was looking to kind of package up and,
why don't you get into yours first if you want to do that first? That's perfect.
I made great trades. Yes, you did. Yes, you did, buddy. All right. Very good.
Yeah. Good work, Jesse, on that one. Thanks for listening to this. Will be great. This will be great.
My initial thoughts are like, okay, you've done a great job to this point. Now you have the rookie picks as well, so you can consolidate and still kind of retool while you're dominating, right? So like, this is Dynasty. This is what you want to do. You know, let's dominate while we're also reloading. So why not go for the top? I mean, you already have Mahomes. Why don't we pair him with Josh Allen, right? Looking at that roster, that team really should probably be rebuilding based on who he has and his overall roster. So my idea is really to come together here and just kind of take a piece from each group, because essentially they're all just bench players for you anyway. So you can kind of mix and match really any of these players, but I was just trying to put together enough interesting pieces. If you're going to trade Josh Allen, you better get a hell of a return. If you want to plug it in a trade calculator, it's going to be massively lopsided to what you're giving away. So you'd be losing this trade. But if you're getting Josh Allen, I mean, you're improving your points per game and you're getting the best asset. So like we always say, you know, 100 pennies doesn't equal $1, because we always want that dollar anyway. But here's what I put together: Trey Lance, Damian Pierce, Jerry Jeudy, Pat Freiermuth, and the 105 for Josh Allen. He would probably say, give me the 101 and you can keep one of those other pieces. You know, maybe there's another tight end he prefers as opposed to Freiermuth. Maybe he likes Cole Kmet better, Mark Andrews better. I'd be willing to, like I said, mix and match any of those pieces. If I have to go to Mark Andrews to get a little sexier name there, if I have to go to like DJ Moore instead of Judy, I know Judy's getting a little bit of he's right now kind of a hot name. I just sold one of my shares, so somebody came to me and offered me a trade I couldn't refuse, and so I figure that's anytime I'm getting trades that are blowing me away, like that's a pretty good sign of the market. Damian Pierce, another guy who's pretty much guaranteed to have competition in that backfield next season. Like I don't know how many times they're going to bring back Rex Burkhead. So, you know, and then I mean, having the intrigue and upside of Trey Lance that we talked about earlier, you know, it just if he has the value and he has enough intrigue for a rebuilding team, like that's really the only way you're going to move off Josh Allen is you're going to have another piece like that. The 105 gives him a shot at, you know, an Anthony Richardson or whatever, you know, who knows how that player builds his team. But at least it's picks, right? So you can throw in a couple seconds, you can do whatever else you need to do. But the whole goal here is you have the assets. So why not shoot for the top? Why are we messing around? Let's go get them.
Well, so he puts in the chat why, and this is why I wanted to start with yours. It's a Buffalo-based league. He's in Buffalo, right? He's a Buffalo fan. Josh is impossible to get. Look at the league name, which is Best If Left Last Society. It stands for Bills, right?
So
but
he would rather own Josh Allen than win.
On.
Got it.
And then he goes, okay, maybe I can do that. Haha, that's a lot. That's exactly right. And I think what you're saying is kind of he's wrapping himself around to this to be like, you're going for Josh Allen. And what you're saying is that's fine. Like let's go do it. And I kind of agree with you. And I saw your trade on there, and that's why I wanted to start with it because we all have Lance in our trades. Let's just kind of cut to the chase here, right?
Yeah, we do.
You were the one going bigger than any of us. And I was like, rather than save it for the end, let's put it right at the beginning of this. Getting Josh Allen on your roster with Pat Mahomes, I mean, that I could see people leaving the league. You know, be like, I'm never going to win this. I'm out. But I love that move. And it being in a Bills league, I mean, obviously Jesse is a fan of the Bills and loves Josh Allen, obviously, in all of this. That would be a killer trade. And I do like where your head's at with that.
Here's
Britt, what do you think about that?
Oh, I think that's genius. I think that's cold-hearted, like stone cold killer kind of mentality. Exactly. And I am here for that. And if you can do it, and if you can, you know, you've got so much depth and so many draft picks, like why not do that? Keep your team on like at the top for the next few years, and then you still have all those picks. So you never really have to go in full on rebuild mode. I think that's genius.
This is the team to do it on. You've got so many assets on this team and you dominate. You already won. You're playing with house money now. Just go burn some money. Just literally go overpay to the hills here. Go get your guy Josh Allen. Like literally you put it perfectly there, Scott. Like let's say he wants Andrews and Lance and the 101 and the 105. Sure. Send it. Like, I don't care. Give me Josh Allen. What's it going to take? You know, it's literally like a blank check situation because you've got enough depth. I think you're okay everywhere. You don't have any weak spots. And just one, so you've got some money in the bank here anyway, in a sense. I think Josh Allen helps you to another title better than any of those pieces because you need to consolidate. You put it perfectly. Yeah, I agree. It's a baller trade, Scott, and I wanted to make sure we had plenty of time to catch up on that because that better than my trade. Well, I was thinking about it, but I didn't think it was going to happen.
And I mean, Josh Allen was the first name I looked at and it worked out. But if you look at the other rosters and you go, okay, well, if I can't get Allen because it's a Buffalo league, could I get Joe Burrow? Could I get Justin Herbert? If you look at those rosters, I mean, yeah, maybe if you're going to blow them away, but I think you're going to end up paying more for one of those guys than you'd have to pay. So you might as well just pay it for Josh Allen.
You're going to pay more.
Just go get the best. Like that's where I stand on this based on the assets that you have. You're going to have to everybody in the league's probably going to make you overpay for any player that
especially as the winner, right?
So you might as well just go get the best, just figure out what's it going to take. I mean, listen, if he just says there's absolutely nothing I'd trade him for, offer your whole team. I don't care. Just see what happens. Like you got it. There's at some point the guy's if he doesn't care about winning, I don't know why he's in the league. Like, go join another league and draft Josh Allen. Like, I just don't understand.
That's another twist. This guy that has Allen is one of the players that is not responding to texts and is kind of maybe leaving the league, which is a perfect option because if you get someone joining the league they're going to want to blow it up anyway. So this is
and
exactly
they have to.
the
That
kind of
roster's not good. So
correct.
yes.
Yeah. Then they've got an aging roster with Dalvin Cook and James Conner, and they got Gabe Davis, Mike Evans. Like their receivers are not great. Like they're going to have to do a lot of work. And I think sending Allen is what they got Brady on that roster. You know what I mean? Like they're going to need to do a lot of work. And so I think this is the perfect kind of an idea. And here again, Jesse in the chat, I love it. Ballsy, but I want Josh so bad. Then go get him. I think, Jesse, you've got our blessing. Go spend whatever you got to spend. Go
Jesse,
get your boy
replace
Josh
that
Allen.
manager. Then go get him.
That's right. That's right. Go replace him and then get him. I like it. Britt, not to say that your trade is not as good as Scott's. I don't think either one of us are. But I wanted to get to yours next. If you don't mind, give us some of your thought process on the trade that you came up with that involved Lance.
No, mine's not good at all. And if you weren't here at the beginning of the show, it's a perpetual joke that I hate trading because I definitely am more of a redraft girl. And I'm still, it's hard for me to part with my assets. And I don't really, I haven't completely figured out this trading situation yet. But I want to trade with Kenny Techie. And I would trade Lance. We touched on it earlier in the show. There's just too much uncertainty around him. Mm-hmm. And I would pair him with Ezekiel Elliott because he's already got Pollard. He's already got Malik Davis. Pollard's probably going to be the guy going forward, even recovering from that ankle injury. I would trade him for probably Amari Cooper and then a combination of picks, a late first or high second round pick, because I like having those wide receivers in those deep flex leagues. In Dynasty especially, they just last longer. You don't have to move them. And Cooper has done really well in Cleveland. So the guy that I'm trading with only has 3 quarterbacks and 3 running backs, and none of them are very good. So I think you could probably get a first round pick of some sort plus Amari Cooper if you trade Lance and Zeke. But I don't know. I'm not good at trades. What do you think?
Hey, I like it. I'll say it this way. I think the only catch I would have is you're sending a quarterback without getting one back, which sometimes means you can get a lot back. Right. And I think I'm not saying this is a bad trade. I think you're on the right line here. I'm not high on Cooper myself, as high as some others. But I think if you were to make that like the 110, I think that trade makes a ton more sense with the late first. Right. And I think that's kind of where your head was at anyway. Also, sending Zeke, I don't want Zeke on this roster. Like Zeke to me is an easy send away. The other guy, Kenny Techie, has Dak Prescott's, and he's only got Etienne, Mixon, and Pierre Strong at running back. He might be looking at like, well, I could use a running back, who knows who he's going to get at the 110 for running back. Zeke might be better than that. It's hard to say. So I like that trade. I thought it was a very fine trade, and it's not necessarily blowing it all up and starting over, but I do think it's the kind of trade, again, with Lance being such an uncertainty and just such a question mark, I don't mind getting rid of both of those players and getting back a solid Cooper and a pick. I like it. What about you, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to move on from Zeke wherever I can. And I do like Cooper. He's probably gonna be a starter on this team most weeks anyway. And then moving on from Lance and just turning that into a pick where if you want to mitigate your risk and, just bring some liquidity to the roster. I mean, not that you don't have any picks already, but, adding more picks and then maybe using those picks to package and go get, Josh Allen or another player. So again, it's not always necessarily the big trade that gets it done. Sometimes it's a cascading effect. And so you start with something like this and, make your roster a little bit more flexible, then that's going to give you the opportunity to then package more assets to go get the players you really, really want at the end of the day.
Yep. And then here's Jesse in the chat again, chiming in for his own team. He likes Cooper. He wants out on Zeke and Lance. So again, you're right in line with what he's looking for. So that's a good feeling. I think that's a fine trade. It's a fine trade. And I'll kind of pivot into mine. Mine was also trading Lance. And again, Lance is just a question mark on this team. So my first thought was kind of what Scott said. Where's the weakness? There really isn't one. Like there's really no position that needs a lot of help. I mean, I do think quarterback, I would like to have a better quarterback than Lance as my QB 2 or 3, depending on how you look at this team. Because again, I think Cousins is probably going to be my QB2 in most situations. I don't mind starting Cousins. I'm fine with that. But I wouldn't mind having a better backup than Lance if he doesn't play. So my trade was to send Lance, Kittle, and Kmet to D. Wiseman for Pitts and Mac Jones. And the logic here, again, I think Mac Jones is on the way out. I think a lot of people don't like Mac Jones. I think he's kind of, a crusty kind of value. Not a lot of people like him. Pitts had a really down year. I still think he's a stud tight end. And this puts Kittle in the team with Lance, it kind of creates a stack with the guy that has Garoppolo and Purdy. So it kind of locks that team into like whatever the QB is in San Francisco. So it adds a little bit of value there with the stack with Kittle. I feel like that it makes it more attractive. And then adding a Komet to help consolidate. Again, it's a tight end premium league. A lot of people like tight ends. And again, if the guy has Pitts, he probably likes tight ends. So that was kind of some of my logic, because it helps you consolidate one roster spot. It gives you, in my opinion, a better QB3, someone I'm more willing to throw in there on a bye week or matchups or whatever with Mac Jones over Lance. And then again, it upgrades you in a way, in my opinion, a big way, from Kittle and Komet to Pitts at tight end. So Scott, what do you think about that one? Is that one you might like, or is there missing a piece there for you?
Yeah, so you're consolidating to get, the best piece in Pitts. I like that. And then Mac Jones, which I'm not sure if I really want to say this publicly, but he's pretty much my biggest buy right now. So
there you go.
At the quarterback position, because, we talked earlier about why is Trey Lance where he is, and it's, look around. I mean, what else is there? Right. And so if we look at Mac Jones, he is, I believe, QB 21 right now in DLF startup ADP. I don't know that it can get much worse. You had like a special teams coach and a defensive guy as his coordinators last year. He had pretty much no one to throw to, like, regardless of what you think of Devontae Parker and Hunter Henry. They've got to upgrade weapons, right? I just don't see any scenario in which it gets worse. So to me, if you can buy him at QB 21 and, over the next 3 seasons, I just think he could sneak in one of those like back end QB1 seasons, like a Matt Ryan year where he threw for a bunch of yards and he had a great touchdown to interception ratio. And then he gives you 2 other like QB2, high end mid-range QB2 seasons. Right. So I just don't see how he's going to finish that far down. I don't think you're going to lose. And then after that, you could sell him for probably more than you paid for him, right? Because he's still a young quarterback. He'll probably get a second contract somewhere. And even if not, like, what did you pay for him? So yeah, I definitely think Mac is a buy right now. I'm not seeing Bill O'Brien, what he's done with every quarterback that he's worked with, like, regardless of what you think of him as a head coach and certainly as a GM, but he won't be doing anything with the personnel. And he doesn't have to worry about coaching or defense or anything. All he's going to do is work with Mac Jones in the offense. So I have full trust in him to do that.
Well, and there was one piece of this trade I didn't consider. Of course, if Jesse's a Bills fan, he hates the Patriots. So it's like, man, maybe he won't want Mac Jones. But he did say again, his comment, it's a good trade. I like getting Pitts on the dip. And then, of course, Scampers on the typo. Putts have always been my downfall. So that was well played, Scampers, on that one. But yeah, I think, again, it's not the worst trade. It's not the biggest trade. But Britt, what do you think? Are you on the Pitts train? Do you think he's someone you want on your team, or is Kittle kind of the same?
Yeah, I love Kyle Pitts. He's younger. He's got less of an injury history. And I don't really think that there's any way that Atlanta continues this very minimal passing attack. They had to this season because of who they had at quarterback. I don't see that continuing. Pitts is going to get his. He's going to be a great asset for years to come. Whereas you're not really sure with Kittle. He is, he's top, but so was Pitts, and Kittle's getting older. So I like getting him. And I like this more of a certainty surrounding Jones than Lance. I'm such a Lance hater, but I just can't have anything to do with him at this point.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So Jesse, there's a lot of really good meat on the bone there for you. A lot of good trades you seem to have or at least for a fan ever has some good comments on. So appreciate you sending that in. Obviously appreciate you being in chat to give us some real-time feedback too. That's amazing. Anybody who's listening, if you want us to go through your team and find a trade for your team, submit it. The link is through the link tree on Dynasty Junkies at Dynasty Junkies on Twitter. You can find it there. We tweet it out from time to time. It's on my own link tree on at Andrew Hall FF. You can find it anywhere you want to go, but definitely send in those trades. We love seeing leagues. We love seeing listeners and kind of helping people out. So definitely submit that. So with that, we're going to wrap it up here tonight. Britt, thank you so much for helping us out. Why don't you tell people where they can find you and what you got going on here in the offseason?
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. It's always fun to talk football, even in the offseason. You guys can find me over at Fantasy Alarm. Not doing too much right now because it is baseball season, but when football rolls back around in free agency, catch me over there. You can also catch me at Lightning Round. It's starting back up on Wednesday, the 15th.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so we'll be doing that with Kevin and Coop. And every other Tuesday, I'm hosting Her Story in the Making, kind of highlighting some up and coming women in the fantasy space, women in the sports space. So that's been a really cool thing that you can check out as well.
Awesome. No, we love it. And I love seeing the diversity in the industry. I love having all the different voices and all the different minds. There is no wrong answer. There's only helpful things. And I love seeing different people come up in this that, again, maybe don't have the exposure. Like, I love what you guys do at Women in Fantasy Football. I think that's a terrific idea. We've had Kelly on, we've had Cooter, we've had some other really great people that I'm big fans of. So anytime we can get you guys a little bit, spread your love, we're here to help you with that. So with that, obviously, you can follow us, like I said, at Dynasty Junkies on Twitter. You can follow me at Andrew Hall FF. You can follow Scott at Scott_Sidlow. You can follow Rocky if you can find him. I'm not giving his handle. He's not here. He'll figure it out. Make sure you subscribe, rate, and review to the DAP Network on YouTube and find us on Twitter at DAP_network. Obviously, that's where we go live. You'll see us all the time. Put on those alerts on YouTube. You'll be glad to help us out with that. And do give us ratings. We definitely like feedback. Send us a DM, all things like that. At this point, if you've listened this long, you're curious. DJ3 is most likely locked up. We got most of the people are pretty much informed, and we've got a good third Dynasty Junkies league that we're going to be doing. We're going to be talking about that as we go forward in the offseason. All three of us are going to be sharing a team, which will be entertaining and kind of exciting and terrifying all at the same time. But yeah, it's been a pleasure having you on, Britt. Really great time to chat with you tonight. And again, you're not necessarily a rookie anymore. This is your first postseason. You're officially a junkie. Welcome to the club. Nice to have you on. With that, Scott, I'll let you take us out of here.
Yeah, thanks again to Jesse for the submission. And Jesse's a great dude. He's involved in a lot of stuff, a lot of our leagues and everything. So awesome to get one of his leagues on here and fun to do that for him. Even though the league was on sleeper. I know, Jesse. We'll let this one slide. All right. Yeah, Senra, I'll be talking to you soon, buddy. We got some stuff in the works, so I appreciate all you, everybody in the chat. Like, thanks for throwing in your
very busy
opinions
chat
and comments and hanging out with us tonight. Super awesome. Send us your Find Me a Trades. Let's get those going. We've got amazing next couple of months lined up here. I mean, we've got finished up our divisional series, and we're gonna do tons of rookie stuff. We're gonna do mock drafts. We're gonna have more amazing guests, and stay tuned because we got a lot of fun stuff coming up. This is the time of year to make moves and increase the value in your dynasty league. So let's do that. For Britt, Flynn, for Andrew Hall, I'm Scott Sidlow. Junkies out.